Hey guys, I put together a few references and Easter eggs from the Marvel's Punisher series that was released on Netflix in November last year. This is my first ever video, so bear with me. But first, a look at the music references in the trailer. Metallica's One was the perfect song choice for the trailer. It came off the 1988 album And Justice for All and was written by James Hetfield and Lars Ulrich. The song is about a World War I soldier that has been blown to hell by an artillery shell, losing all his limbs, his sight and his hearing. He's in constant pain, and all he really wants to do is die. In the music video that was released on MTV in January 1989, the video story is intercut with scenes taken from the 1971 anti-war movie Johnny Get Your Gun. This is actually the film that inspired James and Lars to write the song. Both in the music video and the film it's inspired by, we see clear similarities to Frank Castle and his military background. And in one of the episodes, we actually hear Frank say,
"Worst things than dying, Bill. I wake up most mornings and I want it. I hope for it." Yeah.
Before we start, there will be spoilers and you have been warned. Let's get started. At the beginning of the first episode, we see Frank taking care of some unfinished business from Daredevil Season 2. We get his well-known line as he turns the bikers into roadkill.
One batch. Two batch. Anytime.
The Dogs of Hell show up twice before in the MCU. First time we see these guys is in an Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. episode called Yes Men that aired in March 2014. Here the Asgardian Lorelei comes to Earth and uses her powers to control the bikers. S.H.I.E.L.D. arrives at their bar, which causes a siege. Ultimately, the gang is taken down and Lorelei is taken into custody. Next time we see them, they show up in Daredevil Season 2 Episode 1, called Bang, where Foggy goes to their clubhouse for information and almost gets his ass kicked. They show up again in the second episode, Dogs to a Gunfight, where Frank kills all but one of the members present and steals a truck to use as a decoy. At least he has a clean truck. Oh, never mind. Last time we see them before the Punisher show is in Episode 3, New York's Finest. Frank is planning to take out the remaining members of the New York chapter. He blows up their bikes parked outside and gets their attention with a spotlight from his rooftop perch. Daredevil doesn't want anyone killed, so he knocks Frank out. And he now has to fight the bikers alone while getting Frank out of there in one piece. Back in the opening scene, we see Frank taking care of the last person involved in the death of his family, Mickey O'Hare. He finds him in a bathroom stall at the airport right before his flight leaves, and using the tools at hand, he crosses off the last name on his list.
You believe that? Get a room, you dirty bastards.
This is a cool nod to the Garth Ennis Punisher comic Max, the Man of Stone story arc that was released in November 2015. Although in the comics, it's William Rawlins that is subject to Frank's brutal side. He's not being strangled, but gets his hand cut off and is taken prisoner by Frank. Cool anyhow. After the intro, we find Frank 6 months later trying to live a low-key life as a construction worker under the assumed name of Pete Castiglione. We find some references in the Punisher War Journal comic from 1990. Things have gotten a little heated in Queens after Frank kills a corrupt politician's son, and Frank travels to see his family in Italy, while things cool down at home. Shit magnet as Frank is, he soon ends up in a conflict with a local mob family. A few times in the show we see Frank reading books. The first book we see him reading is Moby Dick. If you haven't read the book, it's about Captain Ahab that loses his leg to a white whale and spends the rest of his life in pursuit of revenge, forsaking everyone and everything else. First time we're introduced to Curtis in the TV series, he's hosting a meeting for a veterans support group. He served with Frank in Afghanistan, and it was during that time that he lost his leg. He's one of the few people that know that Frank is still alive, and he's kept his mouth shut. Curtis shows up in the Punisher comic Marching Power from 1987. He looks a little different, and sadly, he turns out to be a bad guy that Frank ends up punishing by pushing him out of a helicopter and killing him. Okay, this is a reference I have not seen in any other Easter egg videos. If you look closely at Frank's wife, Maria, from the dream sequences, you'll see that her dress is covered in small blue and slightly purple flowers. Forget-me-nots. Maybe this is a reference to Frank not forgetting about his family, but during my last comic book binge I came across a reference to these flowers. In the 1995 four-part comic Punisher Year 1, Frank is fresh with grief from losing his family. He talks about Maria planting the forget-me-nots outside of their family home. First time we run into the Nucci's, the gang is having a private poker game in the basement of Lanello's restaurant. They get robbed by some of Castle's not-so-nice co-workers from the construction site. When the new kid from work, Donnie, drops his wallet, the Nucci's know his name. After dealing with the scumbags that dragged Donnie into this in the first place, Frank, who was keeping his head down, now has to take care of the problem.
You have to make him give up the others. The circuit breaker. Christ.
We see the lights go out and boom, boom, boom. You know what it's like. When the lights come back on, you got a room full of dead guys. The only guy still standing is Tony Nucci, who Frank shoots in the head with his own gun. In the 2000 Punisher story arc, Welcome Back Frank, the Nucci families are the main antagonists. The crime family, led by Ma Nucci, controls many illegal activities in New York City. Frank decides it's time to take them out, and kills her 3 sons, Eddie, Bobby, and Carlo Nucci. It would be cool if we could see more of the Nucci crime family in the latest seasons of the TV series, as a result, of course, of Frank killing the Nuccis in the first season. And maybe even another Daredevil crossover? At the end of the first episode, we are introduced to another character from the comics, Micro, played by actor Eben Moss-Bachrach. His line, "Welcome back, Frank," refers to the Punisher 2000 comic book story arc by the same name. Micro tracks Frank down to get his help in finding the men who came after him and who murdered Frank's family. His storyline turns out to be quite intertwined with Frank's over the season. Much like in the comics, Micro becomes Frank's man in the chair, and the bromance is my favorite relationship to watch develop over the season. Micro first appeared in the Punisher comic Marching Power from 1987. He's Frank's go-to guy and helps out with just about anything. It's in the Punisher comic from 1993, The Origin of Microchip, Volume 1, we get to know more about Micro's backstory. In the comics, Frank and Micro team up for years, taking out bad guys. But Micro eventually betrays him, and Frank ends up punishing him. I am going to leave it at that for this episode. I hope you found it interesting, maybe even learned something new. I'm currently working on another Easter egg reference video, where I'll touch down on a few different things: Anvil, Karen, Lewis, the Bolton, radio and TV station references, and of course Jigsaw. So, subscribe, leave a comment, and like. If you think I missed anything, let me know, and I will see what I can do for the next episode. Until then, take care.